Today we're going to take a look at the past 4.6 billion years of Earth's history. So let's start with a quick overview of the geologic time scale. This is a record of life forms and geologic events in Earth's history, and it's divided into eons, and then eras, and then periods, and then the smallest division of time are epochs. Here you can see some of the different names for them. We have the Precambrian and the Phanerozoic are our two eons. The three eras are the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. These are divided into periods, which are subdivisions varying in length from tens of millions of years to less than 2 million years. And then epochs are further subdivisions that we see just in the Cenozoic, the most recent era, and this is because the fossil record is much more complete for this most recent time. So one thing to think about is why are the divisions of geologic time not all equal in length? And as you hear about these different time periods, I think you'll start to understand the answer to that. So here's a quick overview of the geologic timescale and the different eras and periods that we're going to talk about. And here's an idea of the duration of the different eras. The Precambrian lasted about 4 billion years, and then you can see that the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic were all much shorter than that. Here are some of the important events that happened during geologic time, and we'll be talking about all of these different events throughout the video today. So we're going to start with the Precambrian time. This is the earliest of all geologic ages, and we see sedimentary rock from the Precambrian. It shows us a permanent record of Earth's past, including what types of life were present during this time. Interestingly, Earth was already more than 600 million years old when life first started. The planet had cooled down, developing a solid crust, and oceans were created from water vapor in the atmosphere. Many scientists think that it's these primordial seas that gave rise to the first life. There were hot, mineral-rich volcanic vents in the oceans that might have been catalysts for chemical reactions that possibly led to living cells eventually. We see the earliest living organisms were microscopic bacteria about 3.5 billion years ago. New varieties began to use the sun for photosynthesis, like you see here, the cyanobacteria called stromatolites, about 2.5 billion years ago. This is a move that would ultimately lead to simple plants and which opened up the planet to animal life later in the fossil record. Oxygen levels finally reached about 1% about 2 billion years ago, and then they didn't reach 21% until around 800 million years ago, and this began to breathe life into more complex organisms. The first multicellular organisms appeared in the fossil record about 600 million years ago. The earliest multicelled animals that survived this Precambrian era fall into three main categories. The simplest are sponges, which have no organs, cnidarians, which include sea anemones, corals, and jellyfish. They have a very simple digestive system with a mouth. And then annelids, which are also known as segmented flatworms. And they have fluid-filled body cavities and they breathe through their skins. This long time of the Precambrian, this 4 billion years of Earth's history, ended with a prolonged global ice age. And here is a quick look at what the continents and the oceans look like at the end of the Precambrian time. You can see it's very different than present-day locations. So that covers the first 4 billion years of Earth's history. Now we're going to look at the last 500 million years, which is the Phanerozoic. And we'll start with the Paleozoic era, and it's divided into the periods that you see here. So the Cambrian period marked a profound change to life on Earth. Previously, living organisms were fairly small and simple. Most of the continents were covered in shallow seas where life was thriving and diversifying. At this point, all life on Earth can be found in the oceans. Invertebrates were common, and the most well-known fossil of this time is the trilobites, which left a huge number of fossils. Trilobites lived in the seas and had flattened, segmented bodies that helped to protect them from predators. More than 17,000 species are known to have survived until the mega extinction that ended the Permian period 251 million years ago. During the Cambrian was a time of the most intense burst of evolution ever known, called the Cambrian explosion. An incredible diversity of life emerged, including many major animal groups alive today. What was the spark of the Cambrian explosion? Scientists don't know for sure, possibly more oxygen in the atmosphere, and this would have caused a more hospitable environment with a warming climate and rising sea level. Next we have the Ordovician period. Here we have a rich variety of marine life which flourished in the seas, and the first primitive plants began to appear on land. Most of the world's landmasses came together to create the supercontinent of Gondwana, which included the continents of Africa, South America, Antarctica, and Australia. Gondwana drifted south throughout this period, finally settling on the South Pole. Life at the start of the Ordovician remained confined to the seas, but now we have fish starting to become more widespread in the fossil record. They were small and had jawless mouths, which tell us they lived by filtering food off the bottom of the ocean. There's also evidence that the first primitive plants began to appear on the previously lifeless land. Freezing temperatures at the end of the Ordovician resulted in the second largest mass extinction of all time, wiping out at least half of all marine animal species about 443 million years ago. Next we have the Silurian. Here we see animals and plants finally emerge on land. The climbing ocean temperatures and rising sea levels gave way to shallow marine environments. Huge reef systems were dominating the clear tropical seas. Fish were now diversifying and extending their feeding options beyond just filtering things off of the seafloor. The first true jawed fishes appear, and even though they remained fairly small during the Silurian, they were on their way to becoming one of the planet's top predators. The first evidence of life on land was a mere few centimeters long. For example, arthropods, which are centipedes and arachnids, the ancestors of spiders. We also see the first true plants on land, evolving with rigid stems so they could stand upright, but they lacked leaves. The Silurian time period ends with a few minor extinction events linked to a change in climate. Next we have the Devonian period, known as the Age of the Fishes because it spawned a remarkable variety of fish throughout the world. The most interesting of them were the armored placoderms, a group that first appeared during the Silurian with powerful jaws lined with blade-like plates in place of teeth. Early placoderms fed on mollusks and other invertebrates, but later species developed into ferocious monsters measuring up to 33 feet long. There's a recently discovered fossil creature from the Devonian. It's thought to be a vital link between fish and the first vertebrates to walk on land. Found in the Canadian Arctic in 2004, Tiktaalik has a crocodile-like head and strong, bony fins that scientists think it used like legs to move around in shallow waters or even on land. The fish showed other characteristics of terrestrial animals, including ribs, a neck, and nostrils on its snout for breathing air. The first amphibians appear in the Devonian and breathe through simple lungs in their skin. They may have spent most of their lives in the water, leaving it only to escape the attentions of predatory fish. Plants begin spreading beyond the wetlands during the Devonian, with new types developing that could survive on dry land. Toward the end of the Devonian, the first forests arose. The Carboniferous period takes its name from large underground coal deposits that date to it. Formed from prehistoric vegetation, the majority of these deposits are found in parts of Europe, North America, and Asia that we know were lush, tropically located regions during the Carboniferous. This coal was produced by bark-bearing trees that grew in lowland swamp forests. Over millions of years, the organic deposits of this plant debris formed the world's first extensive coal deposits, coal that humans are still burning today. The growth of these forests removed huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, leading to a surplus of oxygen. Atmospheric oxygen levels peaked around 35% compared with 21% today. It may also explain the giant creepy crawlies that now emerged. The size reached by insects and similar creatures is thought to be limited by the amount of air they are able to breathe. Deadly poisonous centipedes some 6 feet in length crawled around with mammoth cockroaches and scorpions as much as 3 feet long. Most impressive of all were the dragonflies that grew to the size of seagulls. One exquisitely detailed fossil of a dragonfly that existed 320 million years ago shows it had a wingspan of 2.5 feet. Amphibians were also growing in size and diversity during the Carboniferous. There were predatory species that resembled modern-day crocodiles. The earliest reptiles appeared, which were identified from the remains found inside fossilized Carboniferous tree stumps. They were small, agile, lizard-like animals. At the end of the Carboniferous, Africa collided with eastern North America, an event that formed the Appalachian Mountains. By the end of the Carboniferous, the Earth's land masses were moving toward a single global supercontinent called Pangaea. The emerging supercontinent of Pangaea presented severe extremes of climate and environment due to its vast size. The lush swamp forests of the Carboniferous were gradually replaced by conifers, seed ferns, and other drought-resistant plants. Early reptiles were shielded by their thicker, moisture-retaining skins. They moved in where amphibians had existed previously. Over time, they became ideally suited to the desert-type habitats in which we find them today. The Permian seas were dominated by bony fishes with fan-shaped fins and thick, heavy scales. There were large reef communities that harbored squid-like nautiloids. Ammonoids, with their tightly coiled, spiraled shells, were also widespread in the Permian fossil record. Here's what the continents looked like at the end of the Permian. The Permian, however, represented the end for much of the early prehistoric life. The Paleozoic era came to a disastrous end around 251 million years ago, marking a biological dividing line that few animals crossed. The Permian extinction, which was the worst extinction event in the planet's history, is estimated to have wiped out more than 90% of all marine species and 70% of land animals. There are many different theories to what might have caused this extinction. Some scientists think that a series of volcanic eruptions pumped so much debris and dust into the atmosphere that the sun was blacked out, causing a significant drop in temperature and preventing plant photosynthesis, which in turn would cause the food chains to collapse. Other scientists point to global climate change, citing evidence for a period of sudden warming and cooling. These rapid extremes of conditions may have meant that species were unable to adjust. Other theories include a catastrophic release of methane gas stored under the seabed triggered by earthquakes or global warming, or possibly a massive asteroid impact. But the theory of the widespread volcanism, the volcanic eruptions that pump the debris into the atmosphere blocking out the sun, that's the most widely accepted theory. So that wraps up the Paleozoic era, and that ends our time for this first video, Earth's History Part 1. Make sure that you watch Earth's History Part 2 to get the rest of the story.